Hello, you are now entering the infinite void. Hang on tight. We cannot save you now.
Hello, welcome to this week's episode. I'm your co-host Jacob.
And I'm your co-host Matty, and this week's episode is on sustainable energy. So this is almost like a third part, isn't it, to our recent episode? So we talked about sort of designing cities of the future, and then we talked about automation in the future and how that was going to impact things like transport and stuff. And this is almost like a third part where we talk about energy of the future, I guess. So where things are going in the energy industry and sort of what's going to be changing over the next couple of decades. Does that seem sort of fair enough about what we're talking about?
Yeah, no, I'd say that's a pretty good way of summing it up because it's like you were saying, and like especially with the last couple of episodes, like when we first did Future Cities, we had all these things that we wanted to say, but it's like you were saying, they were in episodes of their own, and
Yeah, yeah,
it's unfair to make a 3-hour episode, or maybe it's not, but we've split them up, and I'd say, yeah, because there's a lot to talk about, especially with just kind of having a brighter future for humanity as well.
yeah.
Like this is a good thing to sort out.
Yeah. Um, so sustainable energy, I think, like with the automation stuff, for me, it seems like we're sort of on the edge of something again. It feels like at the moment, I know I said in the automation episode that the thing was going to sort of drive the development of automation and its implementation in sort of trucking and cars and things was that it was going to become economically viable.
Yeah.
We might like to think that humans do things for the good of mankind and we're all sort of living in a happy-go-lucky world, but at the end of the day, most things do happen because money's involved. And like with the automation stuff, we're now at the sort of point where renewable and sustainable energy is becoming economically competitive as well.
Yeah.
So I don't know the exact figures, but I think sort of wind energy in particular is like the cheapest it's ever been and is sort of making the cheapest energy per kilowatt hour that we've ever had. So, if at a basic level, if you've got £100 million that you want to invest in an energy company, sort of oil and gas is becoming progressively more difficult to produce. We've basically used up the easy stuff and we're having to drill places like the Arctic where it's hard and fraught with difficulties. Whereas wind now is becoming sort of commercial scale and easier and I think more economically attractive. So I think there's a lot of good things happening. And I think over the next couple of years, it's going to be a big sort of shift in this sort of direction.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Have you seen the new thing on Netflix with Zac Efron where he like goes and sees all this renewable energy stuff?
I've not watched it, but I've seen of it, and I know what's sort of going on with it. Yeah,
Yeah, it's actually all right. He like goes to Iceland and he sees how they're doing all their like what's it called, geothermal energy and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
But no, I'd agree with you. I'd say it's important, especially like solar as well.
Yeah. Solar's an interesting one, isn't it? Because out of all of them, I think that's the sort of most home scale one.
Yeah.
I'll come back to sort of solar a bit about the issues with it, but it's definitely one that you can see being very easily just bolted onto people's houses, basically. So,
Yeah.
And providing quite a bit of energy in sort of that way. But yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think sort of as we talk about like wind and solar and stuff, the one thing that I sort of want to talk about was like creating a what do they call it? What's the word they use? A sort of diverse energy mix, sort of using different sources of energy to create a more resilient and adaptable energy grid, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's quite interesting because sort of traditionally we've had to use sort of fossil fuels and stuff, and turning off and on power stations to react to things is quite difficult. But with like renewable energy, obviously things come and go offline sort of quite quickly. So it all sort of opens up a lot of different areas and
Yeah.
applications that sort of sense.
Yeah, that's a point. I didn't think about that.
Hmm. But it's always said. I guess I'll just ask the question now. What are your sort of thoughts on nuclear, and what do you think about nuclear energy as a potential source?
I'm not really sure, really. I grew up near, well, there was like a nuclear power plant like 40 miles from where we lived up in North Wales.
Hmm.
And yeah, it was just always interesting. As a kid, I used to hear loads of stories. So I've always kind of been a bit
Yeah.
freaked out by it because I thought, don't blow up. But I don't know. I'm open to it. I've got nothing really against it.
Yeah, I think for me, the role of nuclear is going to be providing what they call like the base load.
Yeah.
So at any time of day, in the middle of the night, basically, there's going to be a base load of energy that you need. That's like the minimum at any time of day you need. And then, of course, when you get to sort of rush hour and people sort of come home from work and stuff, it sort of spikes. But the the base load case, I think, is the sort of ideal situation for nuclear because it's very resilient, and particularly at night where you don't have solar. Wind is obviously intermittent, you don't know.
Yeah.
I think that's the role that nuclear is going to play, for me at least, because it's the only non-fossil fuel, big scale, resilient power generation that we have at the moment. So
Yeah.
mhm.
No, I'd agree with you, to be fair.
Yeah,
Because this is one of the things that I saw when I was like looking into this was it's kind of like all these ideas are great, but with like climate change and everything in the future, some of these might not be viable based off that.
yeah.
So yeah,
Yep,
I would
yep.
agree. You definitely need like baselines.
Yeah, and it also creating like as I said, a diverse mix. A lot of countries seem to be pursuing things very heavily. I know the UK seems to be putting most of its eggs into sort of wind power, which makes sense for the UK. But I think either you've got to be diverse within your country, or we need sort of more cooperation between countries.
Hmm.
I think there are plans to sort of build interconnectors between Africa and Europe. The idea being that sort of Africa, obviously, big solar energy potential. Europe, more wind, geothermal, hydroelectric. If we can sort of couple them together, then you make a more robust system by joining the two together. So,
Yeah.
and I think that's definitely something that needs to be explored more as we move sort of into a new world of renewable energy.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with you. I saw something actually with the UK Space Agency
Mm-hmm.
the last couple of weeks. They've got loads of like, what would you call them? I don't want to say competitions because they're not really competitions. You can like send in your business idea and you might get a grant from them.
Yeah.
And it was all stuff like that for the UK. Like what could you put into space to help the UK with its renewable energy crisis kind of thing, and like to help it move into that with the future.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was actually really cool, some of the things that people were like suggesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, did you know any of the? Did you see any of the stuff? Or
Sorry. They had. I didn't think you'd actually want to know.
yeah,
But they had a couple. So one of them was like coastal erosion. So it was just kind of like the Planet Labs kind of camera.
yeah.
It looked like something like that, and it was just basically scanning the coastal line, and then it would watch for like water erosion on high tide, low tide, and be able to kind of predict where floods might be.
Mm-hmm.
And then another one was like solar potential. So having like looking at how much is bouncing back off the earth with like UV cameras and stuff like that. But it was just really interesting because I was like, to be fair, those are some cool things that we could probably do with the UK, because especially with the UK, I know we're talking about renewable and sustainable energy globally and for the future, but like the UK is going to have a lot of issues going forward with like flooding and stuff.
Yeah.
So that whole idea of like being able to like monitor the coastlines and see where it happens and stuff, I think would be really interesting for us.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting you brought up like the idea of sensors, and obviously in that case, sort of space-based sensors. But one thing that I wanted to talk about was like the grid becoming more techy,
Yeah.
because at the moment with fossil fuels, basically, in essence, most stuff relies on huge amounts of metal spinning around quite quickly. You know, and like the national grid sort of utilizes that. You can, if you have sort of thousands of tons of steel spinning in a turbine, that's obviously quite difficult to slow down and speed up. So it just naturally stays quite constant.
Yeah.
The UK uses 50 hertz AC current, and I think they can deviate by 0. Is it 0.05 or 0.5 of a hertz? So it's quite sort of tightly controlled, because if the current sort of frequency goes off, things start going wrong. But actually, sorry, just a tangent. There's a great Tom Scott video about this. A lot of electronics and stuff use the sort of hertz, the frequency of the electricity signal, to regulate their internal clocks. And something's happening in Europe, which means that their power stations are gradually running slow. I think they're just sort of taking too much load. They're basically overloading the system with stuff. They've not got enough capacity.
Okay.
So it's causing their 50 hertz to sort of slip down to 59.98 or something. And as I said, Tom Scott did a video on it. It was very interesting. Their frequency of their power stations is slightly too low, which means all of their clocks are running slow. But yeah, that's a tangent anyway. If anyone's interested,
That's crazy though.
But yeah, but where was I? Yeah, but our sort of system now relies on big chunks of steel spinning around. But as you move to renewables, where you're looking at solar and wind turbines and things, you lose that, which is potentially a problem, because the system's not resilient. But it also means you can open up a lot of sort of potential in using tech to control the system. One thing that sort of was really interesting to me was a plan. Obviously, as we move towards electric cars, there's going to be like millions of electric cars which have these like quite big batteries just sat there most day with power. So like it's possible that your car could like give electricity back to the grid when it's at peak demand, and it sort of needs a bit of a boost, and then would charge up when there's low demand, and you'd sort of like the batteries in people's cars would form part of the grid almost.
Yeah.
And that sort of stuff I find quite interesting. It's like developing a grid that uses like the new technologies to sort of overcome these issues with renewable energy.
No, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah, I think it's sort of this wider idea of they call it like microgrids, because at the moment, sort of energy uses the idea that you have a massive power station somewhere,
Yeah.
and energy is pumped through to your home and you just use it. But as we use more renewables, because it's more intermittent, because it's more sort of prone to changing slightly very quickly as well. You know, the wind can drop on, can gust and change on seconds, and like clouds can go over sort of instantaneously, sort of stuff. They want to build these microgrids where sort of houses or collections of houses would sort of have their own batteries, whether that's in the form of cars or just like actual batteries, and they'd have their own sort of generation ability, and you wouldn't rely on this grid at all, which I guess sort of means that my idea of using nuclear as a base load sort of goes out the window, because you don't need the base load because there isn't one.
Yeah.
If everyone's sort of, it's less generation and consumption, it's more like a fluid sort of market where energy is just going back and forth between people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's really interesting, that sort of stuff, from my point of view.
No, yeah, I'd agree with you. I think it's a really cool like just subject in general to think about, because there's so many like cool ideas as well that are out there that I've seen. Yeah. I can't remember what the company was, but going back to like the idea of solar energy, because this was one of the things I was seeing in my research. There was somebody that was like coming up with the idea of like how like solar panels, because they're usually fitted to face a certain way, they don't actually like utilize like the whole amount of the day kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they were like talking about like different ways that they were going to like try and solve this problem. And like one way was to have like those ones that I don't know if you've seen on social media that like kind of almost cover the surface completely. So like the ones in the mountains, they're like going over the mountain completely. And it's kind of just like this solar panel mountain. And then the other ones were like, you know, like Tesla, Solar City, ones that kind of look like slate.
Yeah.
And then the other ones were more so on like a robotic arm, and it would kind of like tilt in the day to like take in more sunlight. And I was it's just so interesting because like that's just one of them, and that's just one little aspect of one of them. And like you could sit here all day and just talk about what is the most proficient way of catching solar energy, or what's the most proficient way of catching wind energy.
Yeah, I think on the solar stuff, you know, there are like really way out there plans to like put stuff into space, because obviously at that point you don't have any sort of attenuation from the atmosphere. You don't have to worry about the solar panels getting dusty and sort of losing efficiency. If you can get effectively a Dyson sphere or something like a Dyson sphere and put it in space, you can just capture as much solar energy as you want. So
yeah, just put a load of satellites around the sun, feed it back.
I get this goes into sort of space elevators and stuff, doesn't it? But sort of getting the power back is the main issue. Yeah, just sort of sticking with solar, because what you're talking about there is like photovoltaics. So that's like generating electricity directly from the solar panel.
Yeah.
But the one that I think is maybe coolest is solar thermal. Have you seen any of these things?
No.
So maybe just sort of pick Google up at the moment and put in solar thermal Spain. So they call them heliostats. So basically you have this massive array of mirrors, and they're all focused to like point the sun back at this central tower, which has like a boiler in it.
I have seen this. Yes, this is
looks awesome.
Yes, this is insane.
It looks really, really amazing. And yeah, it's I think they're quite interesting, and they probably don't get enough sort of, because they're actually comparatively quite cheap. So I'm looking at this solar thermal Spain. It's called PS10 Solar Power Plant in Spain. It's near Seville.
It looks insane.
And it cost, just looking at Wikipedia, 35 million euros, which is loose change in the scale of nuclear power plants and sort of major infrastructure, isn't it? So, you know, it's got these 624 collectors, these heliostat mirrors, and it points at this sort of massive tower, and it basically focuses the energy to boil the water and drives the turbine like a normal sort of gas or coal burner would. So
that's insane.
I think this looks really cool.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
Yeah,
it doesn't look real.
No, and it's like, this is the thing. Like, it's really, really simple. Like, the worst thing that happens is like the boiler breaks down. Well, that's no different to a boiler breaking down in a coal power plant. Or, you know, some mirrors get damaged or dirty or something. Well, that's just a simple case of sending someone out and replacing a mirror. Like, compared to like other forms of things, I think these are really cool. And yeah, I just thought I'd bring those up.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah,
that looks really cool.
What other did you have sort of any other renewable energy in mind that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, so
stuff.
There was a few that I'd kind of looked into because I wasn't sure what you were going to look at. So I was like, I'm going to kind of do the base kind of ones that we've got, and the ones that I looked into were solar energy, wind energy, geothermal energy, and hydropower.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know, maybe if you want to talk about wind energy for a little bit. I was going to talk about what they were kind of planning on doing in the UK, because we're getting into our wind farms, aren't we? We want to build them off like the coast of everywhere, pretty much.
Yeah. So maybe you want to look at sort of plans and then pros and cons of each. Would that be a sensible thing? Or...
Yeah, I think that's a good way of doing it. It's quite structured. I think the listeners will appreciate that.
Rather than me going off on my tangents like I usually do. Okay, so wind energy. In Britain in particular, which is where we are, this is probably the number one, I think, isn't it? They seem to be going up absolutely everywhere. And in particular, I think the UK is the world leader in offshore wind energy. So putting wind turbines out at sea. Pros, I think they have potentially massive sort of scale. They're quite easy to scale. A sort of big turbine will easily produce 3 megawatts, which is a considerable amount. It really, again, figures don't particularly matter, but a single turbine can power hundreds, if not thousands, of homes. So, if you're talking about making massive ranges of these with tens of thousands of them, which people are starting to do, scalability is on its side.
Yeah.
They're a well-developed technology. They're quite easy and simple on the pros sort of front. I think the cons are mainly around sort of ecological issues. So there's the bird issue, whether that's an issue or not. People are still debating, but birds flying into these things and disrupting migratory patterns. If you're putting them out at sea, I know there's been some sort of concerns about whether that's damaging the seabed and sort of fishing areas. So I think the main sort of con for this is ecological issues.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think particularly in the UK, they seem to be the way to go, from my perspective at least.
Yeah, no, for sure. I know I've been talking a lot about the UK looking into like solar, but I don't think that's going to be the main one at all.
Yeah. I was just going to see, I can't remember the exact figure now for how much of the UK's energy is generated by wind, but if I just have a quick look, I should look at this earlier. The UK is, so I'm just looking now, Renewable UK says the UK is world leader in offshore wind. I think we do have we have more installed capacity than any other country, and offshore wind accounts for about 4.5 million homes, about 10% of the UK electricity supply. So, that to me I think is sort of promising, because obviously I don't live by the sea, but wind doesn't seem to have ruined the country in any sort of great way, but it's already sort of generating 10% of electricity. So
yeah, I'd say that's very positive.
Yeah.
I'd agree with you. So the next one I've got is geothermal energy, and I don't really think the UK is doing that much with this one.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it has potential, because essentially it's just generating energy from the heat deep inside the earth.
Yeah. So this is geography limited. So in the UK, it's pretty much not going to happen. But I guess the one you've looked at is Iceland.
Yeah. So like in Iceland, where there's a lot of volcanic activity and stuff like that, it's obviously a viable thing. And I think for them, most of their stuff is ran off that, if not all of it. Because I swear, in that Netflix documentary as well, like all of their cars were electric, I think, and they were all running off geothermal energy, like the electric plants.
Yeah, so this is limited to sort of the country, and if there is geothermal, but essentially hot water rising up from volcanic pools. Basically the geothermal energy of the earth is acting as the energy source, so you just use the hot water, which is quite cool. And again, I think it was Tom Scott again. I saw a video where they don't just use the hot water to generate electricity; they literally pipe the stuff into people's houses to like use for heating.
Yeah,
there's so much of it that they just don't really bother mattering with it. They just pump it anywhere and just use it however they want. So
that's funny.
Yeah, it's quite cool.
Yeah,
they can do that.
And then we've got hydropower, which I think the UK does do, but you can get that through loads of ways, can't you? It's mostly just like water wheels and turbines and dams and
Yeah, I think probably dams is the big one, isn't it? You dam a river and then just put the river flow through a turbine to generate electricity. Yeah.
but which I can imagine the UK has quite a lot of. We've got a lot of rivers. I don't know if we've got a lot of dams like America. There's a
I don't
few.
get. Yeah, I don't think we really do any of it that much. Yeah, America is a big one. They use it quite a lot. Obviously, probably Hoover Dam is the most famous in the world. The one that I know of is the Three Gorges Dam in China. That thing, if you've not seen it, is absolutely immense. It is huge. It generates a ridiculous amount of energy, and I know it sort of dammed up enough water that it changed Earth's spin, like the time of the day.
No way.
It's massive. It really is ridiculous. And yeah, yeah. I don't think the UK will really do any of it. The one thing I do know of is there's a place in Wales called Electric Mountain. Have you heard of this?
You might have to say a little bit more.
So Electric Mountain in Wales is it's called pumped hydro storage. So it's still hydropower, but it's not a river. They basically have a lake at the bottom of a hill and a lake at the top of a hill. And when the energy is cheap, they pump all the water to the top. And then when the energy is in demand and at a higher price, so like when people come home from work and stuff, they can just pump the water through the turbines back down the hill and generate electricity.
I have seen this. We got taught this at school.
Yeah, so it's basically like a big water-powered battery, but it's able to like spin up to like full power plant scales in like 15 seconds or something.
That's insane.
It's able to provide like really quick energy on that scale. Yeah.
The other thing really that I didn't involve in this list that I should have involved was probably tidal energy as well.
Yeah. So yeah, tidal I think you put under the hydro category. They're basically wind turbines in the sea, as I understand them. So rather than wind going through them, ocean currents go through them. That's the idea of them, I think. But yeah, I think the biggest con for this one is the environmental impact. You know, the Three Gorges Dam displaced hundreds of thousands of people and flooded numerous cities when they did it. So, you know, if you're damming rivers, there's obviously massive implications for marine life and stuff. So, I think that's the biggest drawback of this, of hydropower.
Yeah, it's definitely not very pretty either.
No. Out of all of them, it's probably the biggest sort of impact and disruptive thing, isn't it?
I'd probably least like to live next to that one as well, which is kind of ironic because it's implying that I'd probably like to live near more volcanic activity than I would near a dam.
Yeah. But I think they probably have their place. You know, particularly if you're combining things. You know, some places have to dam rivers to secure like a water source.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to dam the river anyway, you might as well put some hydropower function into it, even if it's just powering a small city nearby or something. So,
yeah, no, I'd agree with you on that.
Yeah,
might as well do it if you've got it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, they were kind of my four.
Yeah. And have we mentioned solar?
We talked about it in the beginning, but I haven't really mentioned it here. But
Okay.
I think in terms of it for the future, it's probably going to be one of the main ones.
Mm-hmm.
For the UK, it's interesting. It's kind of like that. It's a weird one because the weather's not great here.
Yeah.
And we don't really have that much space.
Yeah.
But
I think for the UK, it will be more of sort of. I don't think we're going to see massive solar farms sort of thing. It will be more of a case of people have them on their homes because they're sort of good and they're just sort of provide a bit of backup when wind drops. You know, as a very approximate estimate, you can say that when it's windy, it's less sunny. So, and vice versa. So, I think that's sort of the UK's situation, but particularly in developing countries in Africa, there could be massive sort of implications for it.
No, yeah, I'd agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
I just had to hold in my yawn then. I didn't want to cut across your point. I'm proper tired today.
Yeah.
The struggle is real. Anybody, if you're wondering why I look like I'm dozy, it's just struggling with it today. There's a lot going on in the world of Jake outside of the podcast. We're moving and all sorts at the moment, so there might be a new background in a couple of weeks. Same for you as well, isn't it, Matty?
Yeah, I think probably weeks or months. I'll be moving, but yeah, for any eagle-eyed viewers as well, you might notice that we're both wearing the same clothes as well because we're recording 2 episodes back to back.
Yeah.
So we've been going for 2 hours already.
Yeah. So you'll have to excuse us if we say anything that is incorrect or you see the occasional yawn, but I'd say we're doing pretty good so far.
Yeah, I think so.
And
so I guess
shows the commitment as well, Matty, you know? Like, we don't want them to miss out on a episode in case something happens. We're making sure the content's ready.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think getting back to renewable energy, I've done some calculations. Are you ready for this?
Okie dokie.
And I don't want to be the guy that pisses on the bonfire, but this is not good. So, so I think we've sort of covered that renewable energy is good. Obviously, it's good, and we need to be developing it more. But I guess I just sort of want to get your take on it. How optimistic are you about this actually being implemented and happening, and this sort of big change occurring in a appropriate timescale?
So I've got a few things to say about this.
Mm-hmm.
Prior to the pandemic, I had the approach that it wasn't going to happen and that we needed something to make it happen.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the pandemic happened and you saw like the internet being used more so as like a utility instead of a necessary, and like this whole idea of just, I don't even know, just less people driving and stuff, and you could see it going down and the skies were like clearing up and stuff. I was like, oh, you know, this could be the thing that kind of like pushes us in the right direction. But the speed in which like governments have just tried to open the economy back up and haven't really cared that much about it. I know I've seen stuff like with Greenpeace like protesting and Extinction Rebellion protesting, being like we should keep some of these things in play, but it hasn't really happened. So I'm not feeling very hopeful that we will implement it in time and we will solve it in time. But I would really like to put my hope in humanity and say that we're going to.
Yeah, I think that's a good point actually about sort of this renewable energy thing is linked back to what we were talking about, like cities and the way people live. As more people move to cities and people work from home more and the internet becomes more prevalent, that's definitely going to help, I think. If we're obviously transport's a massive energy consumption thing, so if doing less traveling, that's got to be a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, as I said, I've done some calculations and I'm probably going to make you feel a lot worse about things.
Here we go.
Okay, so just for a bit, there's 2 case studies that I like to sort of discuss on this thing. So the first one, if anyone's interested in this, just Google Daily Motion Brian Cox Horizon Renewable Energy. So this is from a British television series called Horizon. They do sort of science documentaries, pop science stuff. So you could take a look at that. And in 2010, there was this episode it's actually on nuclear fusion, which is something I'll come back to in a second. But he was discussing sort of renewable energy and sort of what hope there is for humanity changing and managing to pull this off. Okay?
Okay.
So he meets with this guy called Sol Griffiths, who is an interesting guy in himself. And what he tries to do is take all of the emotion out of the debate. So like we're talking about how sort of people's lives are going to be impacted and sort of the pros and cons of stuff. He basically says, I don't care about that. All I care about is the numbers. Can we do it? What do we need to do? Sort of thing. And he runs a wind power company. Okay. So what he has done is he decided to calculate all the energy that he used in an average year. And this is a point sort of just going off on a sidetrack. You know, we've basically talked about electricity, but it's really important to think about like total energy, because ultimately energy is absolutely everything.
Yeah.
Electricity, you know, we use it for lights and we use it for, you know, our TVs and stuff, and we want to start using it for cars. But to produce food, you need energy. To build schools, you need energy. To run hospitals, you need energy. Energy is absolutely everything that we do, and is like the number one thing, apart from water and oxygen, basically, that a society needs. So he decided to calculate everything up. And his figure that he came up with, and he went really hard on this, like he could tell you how much energy you needed to have the newspaper delivered and stuff. But like his figure that he came out with was 18 kilowatts. This is per year, which is the equivalent of 300 light bulbs burning constantly all the time. That's the amount of energy that his lifestyle uses in total. 18 kilowatts. The US average is 11.4 kilowatts. So if you're someone living in the West and you sort of have a car and you live in a nice house and you have electronics, you might maybe go on holiday, you're looking at that sort of 11 to 18 kilowatt range. That's sort of what you're looking at. The worldwide average is 2.2 kilowatts. Okay? So Brian Cox said, okay, I want to do, in 25 years, we want to go completely renewable. Remember, this is 2010.
Yeah.
25 years. And he wanted to give everyone on Earth 5 kilowatts of energy. So about double what they have now. And his reasoning was countries develop. And as they develop, you know, they develop schools, they develop hospitals, building roads, more food. So he said he wanted to give everyone in the world a reasonable standard of living, which you require energy for. So 5 kilowatts. And at the time, this was 6 billion people. This doesn't even factor in the 7.6 billion people on Earth now. So this is a vast underestimate, just for context, but this is not good. So basically, 6 billion people, 5 kilowatts each, 30 terawatts of renewable energy a year in 25 years. Okay? Following so far?
Yep. I'm still here.
They run the numbers, and this is what you come out with. If you want to supply a sixth of that with conventional nuclear energy, you need to build 2.5 full-size reactors every week. If you want to supply a sixth of that, so 5 terawatts with wind, you need to build a full-size turbine every 3 minutes for 25 years.
Jeez.
If you want to supply 10 terawatts, so a third of the total, with solar, you need to build 250 meters squared, so a tennis court's worth of solar panels, every second for 25 years. And if you want to supply just 2 terawatts, so 2 out of 30 terawatts with biofuels, you need to, this is a scary one, you need to build 4 Olympic-sized swimming pools full of genetically modified bacteria every second for 25 years.
Oh my God.
That's the scale of the problem. So the solar panel one, that comes out over 25 years. I calculated these numbers. 800 million tennis courts worth of solar power to supply a sixth of the total. To supply a third of the total. That's the equivalent of England and Scotland completely covered in solar panels. And this is the horrible one. The bio one, if you calculate it, it's the equivalent of 9,861 kilometers cubed of genetically modified bacteria, which is just slightly less in volume than Lake Superior, the largest of the Great Lakes in America, and would make it comfortably the 5th largest lake in the world. full of genetically modified bacteria, and that's to supply 7% of the total energy that we need for this vastly underestimated calculation.
That's insane. If you're just listening, by the way, and you can't see my face, it's just mind blown right now.
Yeah, these numbers are just absolutely mental. Even if I'd say I'm pro-nuclear and think they're good. Even if you're going to supply the entire lot of that energy, all of it, using nuclear power, it comes out. Well, you have to build 50 nuclear reactors a week for a start. You have to build 19,500 reactors in total. There are currently 440 in operation. So you have got to build, what's that? 200 times the amount of reactors we currently have in 25 years.
It's insane.
This is, so I'm optimistic. I think things will change.
But that speed.
This is, for me, verging on an impossibility now.
Yeah.
I just don't see that happening at all. If you want to feel even worse, I've got a second case study.
Let's do it.
So this one was looking at cars. So basically, this guy decided, okay, let's use the space at the side of the road to power the cars on the road. Okay, what do we have to do? So how much space on the side of the road do we have to put aside to power the cars on that road? So he used a couple of assumptions. So he's used single file traffic, cars traveling at 60 miles an hour with 30 miles per gallon efficiency, and an 80-meter spacing between cars, which I think is the stopping distance. So this is a very rough approximation for a sort of rural road with cars on it.
Yeah.
So if you want to use the space at the side of the road, how much space do you need to power those cars? If you want to use biofuels, you need a verge 8 kilometers wide to power the road. If you want to use wind, you need a full-size turbine every 2 kilometers, which doesn't sound too bad, but it's not great. And if you want to use solar to power electric vehicles on the road, you need a 50-meter wide verge on every road. So those are my case studies.
Yeah, painting a lovely picture for the future.
That one for me. The 5th largest lake in the world full of genetically modified bacteria.
Yeah, that's insane.
And when you look at that and like the scale of it, this just seems impossible to me. I don't see that happening.
No, I'd agree with you. I don't see that happening. It's like it always falls back into that kind of conversation that me and you have said in all these episodes, where it's just like, I really hope technology solves that, or like that's a job for AI to kind of figure out. But like, it's just so daunting. It just makes you think sometimes, like, whoever is making those decisions, they just like, well, yeah, let's just carry on how we're going, and future Jake can worry about that.
Yeah. For me, the technology can't solve this problem.
Yeah.
Even if you created nuclear reactors that were 10 times as efficient as the ones we have now, you're sort of quadrupling the amount of reactors we've ever built.
Yeah.
It's just not going to happen. And I think things will change, things will get better, but I don't see it being solved sort of in time at all.
Anytime soon.
No, unfortunately. And I know I mentioned sort of nuclear fusion. So, nuclear fission is what we currently use with like uranium-powered plants. Nuclear fusion they've been trying to crack it for a long time. They're currently building a sort of nuclear fusion reactor in France, which is going to be the biggest one ever built. It's called ITER. They think this could be the one to sort of crack it and reach the threshold where it starts generating electricity. But, nuclear fusion it sort of always seems to be like 20 years away.
Yeah.
And it has been for like 50 years. So I'm skeptical about it. But personally, when you look at those numbers and you look at what technology we have, nuclear fusion seems to be like a get out of jail free card. If we crack
Yeah.
it and we get it to work, there is a remote chance that we can solve this problem. But without it, I don't see it happening. So, yeah.
No, I'd agree with you. I think on that. I think it's like you said. You're walking a tightrope, and with the ones that we've got, they almost don't seem like any of them are like good enough by themselves, and that kind of makes it messy going forward, having loads depending on each other. Although it makes it like resilient. Do you know what I mean? You kind of, it's annoying that we still haven't figured out like one.
Yeah, it is. I think we've just sort of become so reliant on energy, and I know I said energy sort of drives everything, but there's the one simple answer to this is we simply stop using as much energy.
Yeah.
If we that will be problem solved if we cut our energy usage so that our current or near future renewable energy was enough to power it. Problem solved. Suddenly all of our energy needs are met by renewable, but that's obviously not going to happen because we've become used to it, haven't we? So
Yeah.
same with it. All our society sort of built on energy just being there. Yeah. Another cheery
little conversation.
Sorry to dampen your flame on that one.
No?
just as you were getting into, solar it's all going to be good, and then I'm there like,
It's all doomed. It's all doomed.
Meters squared a second is a big ask.
Yeah, no, it is. It is a big ask. I just think it's cool that we're using space to try and figure it out. That's what interested me in it. It's like, what can we put up there to help monitor the situation down here to try and find better solutions for the future? Because that's what I'm all about. Whatever gets us to where we need to be without it being too late. That's all I care about.
Yeah.
So have you got anything else to kind of say on this, or should we move over to space news?
I think that was all I had to say on renewable energy. We leave it at that.
Cool.
Yeah. Okay.
But no, I thought that was fun. I think anybody listening, you have to let us know if we missed any renewable energies or sustainable energies, or if there's anything cool that you've read or seen, because I know that there's always stuff happening with it. It's quite a happening subject. But yeah, let's move over into the space and science news of the week, because there's some pretty cool stuff.
Yeah.
So before we even get to the main bit with NASA and the moon, I've just got something straight off the bat that I wanted to ask you about, Matty. So I'll start with that. So Physics.org are saying that the first ever 3D printed biomimetic tongue surface has been created. So why would that be important?
Really kicked me off with a difficult question there. So this is sort of a wider sort of task in trying to create human, I guess, prosthetics and human replacement parts that are more adaptable and more like the real thing. Our current technologies are quite primitive. When you look at sort of prosthetic limbs and stuff, we're starting to use modern manufacturing techniques and sort of robotics in them, but it's still quite primitive, and particularly stuff like tongues. As I understand it, sort of prosthetic tongues are really nothing more than either you don't have one or you have a very basic rubbery sort of thing that just sits there. It doesn't actually do anything. But yeah, this piece of news, they're basically using these new sort of manufacturing techniques. So they talk about 3D printing and stuff to create a biomimetic tongue, which means it will not only look like a tongue, it will sort of have some of the biological sort of effects of a tongue. So I think they're sort of trying to use it to sense sort of tastes and textures and flavors and stuff. So
Yeah,
I think
I did see that they were doing like how it felt in the mouth, how it reacted to swallowing, speech,
yeah,
its wettability. But
yeah.
no, I thought that was interesting. Is that just where we're going to go then? Do you reckon we're just going to switch everything out with silicon options? Live for a million years.
My personal view on it is I think short term, yes, we'll see some of these sort of cool things happening. Longer term, I think we'll probably grow them. You know, that we've already got the ability. I know the classic one they talk about is like growing an ear on the back of a rat and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, they can do some pretty awesome stuff and grow things, and particularly in the area of stem cell technology. So with this tongue one, I think would also be applicable, that you can sort of create a basic structure, you know, perhaps using silicon or something like that, and then use stem cells to sort of fill it in and grow the actual biological material onto it.
Yeah.
And they're looking at doing that with, I think that even with like human hearts and stuff, they're trying to do that. So that'll
That's
be
cool.
where I think it goes, this sort of more meshing of material science and biology, and medical science. I think will be quite cool. That's where I see it going personally.
Yeah, that's cool. The image for this just looks crazy. Like the texture on this thing that they've got for it. It's bonkers.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's pretty much that for the tongue one.
Yeah. Shall we save the big news for last then?
Yes.
Shall we do that? Okay. So my other bits of news was, sticking with tech, a bit of fun that I found was this guy has managed to create a web sort of API, this web app, that is able to track every broken McDonald's ice cream machine in the US.
Legend.
Yeah, there's nothing worse, is there? Because they never seem to be working.
Yeah.
But yeah, the website is called McBroken, and you can go onto it at any time. You just Google that.
That is
And
amazing.
basically, he's managed to sort of reverse engineer the like app, the McDonald's app where you can like order food and stuff. He's managed to reverse engineer it, because I think it's as simple as, if you try to put a McFlurry into your basket, it will say, sorry, that's not available if the machine's broken.
Okay, smart.
So he's done a bit of testing and stuff, and he found that if you do it too often, it recognizes you're a bot and kicks you off. But he found that you can test it every 30 minutes by putting a McSundae in the basket.
No way.
And he's created this little sort of map and stuff. So basically, he just drops the McFlurry or McSundae in every 30 minutes. And then it just plots all the McDonald's on this map of the US and says when it was last checked and whether it was working or not. And it seems currently that 7.54% of McDonald's ice cream machines are broken.
See, not all heroes wear capes.
Yeah, well, absolute legend.
What an absolute legend.
So it's such a simple idea. It's just a bit of fun, isn't it?
It's a great idea, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Yeah, he says, this is a quote from him. I'm running this on a server that costs $5 a month, so it's bound to crash. Yeah, I think he's just sort of a bit of like a techie nerd that's knocked this up quite quickly and pull it out to the internet, and people have found it quite funny. So I thought I'd bring that up.
Yeah, that's amazing.
It's
That's
called
funny.
McBroken, and the just for credit, the creator is called. I want to give him credit, but I can't find his name. Rashik Zahid is the creator of this bot. So
There you go.
yeah,
That's cool.
and then the other bit of news, so moving into space news, is that on November 2nd, NASA is celebrating 20 years of continuous human habitation in space. So on the 2nd of November 2000, the first continuous habitation of the International Space Station began. And yeah, coming up as we record it in a few days, it will have passed when this goes out. It would have been 20 years of humans in space.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So just some highlights that NASA have got. So total of 2,700 investigations have been carried out on the International Space Station from 108 different countries. The longest, 239 individuals from 19 countries have visited the International Space Station. Peggy Whitson currently holds the records for most days in space at 665, so just over a year.
Insane.
And the longest duration in space also she holds at 289 days in space. So
insane. Yeah. That's so cool. Now that you've mentioned that 20 years of space thing, I think SpaceX has just hit 100 rocket launches as well.
Yeah, I did see that.
Had a nice little montage video on YouTube.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is all promising, that things seem to be going in the right direction, and essentially we've created a habitable place in space that we can live for an extended period of time. So it's really cool, isn't it?
Yeah, it's awesome. It's so inspiring as well. Just the space station and what it's achieved in general, like bringing nations together, and
yeah,
that is just awesome.
Yeah, I know. When I was sort of reading around this, there's sort of a bit of criticism about it. Like I think in total it's cost like 100 billion or something.
Yeah.
And like that money would be better spent on other stuff, and you could build like so many space telescopes or other scientific things. That fusion reactor I mentioned earlier, ITER, only cost 20 billion. So how you could do so much more science with that. But I think just as sort of like a humankind doing its thing, this is what we do, isn't it? Go do things and push the limits of what we can do. So I think it's amazing.
Yeah, it's truly awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And then the final thing that we've got is they have found usable water on the moon.
Yep. So we both picked up on this, didn't we? It's been everywhere over the news. So
yeah, after NASA put out their little cheeky hype statement, being like, "Oh, we've got something to announce."
Mm-hmm.
But no, my the one that I've got is from the BBC.
Yeah.
And they're basically just talking about how they're going to use this. Well, the idea that this water because it's on the sunlight side of the moon, isn't it? So the bit that we can see here on Earth. Mm-hmm. And they want to use that water to sustain the lunar base. Yeah. Which looks really cool. Some of the images and stuff that they've got for it. But it's funny, when they announced this a couple of days ago, you dropped me a text and you were like, "Oh, it's going to be water." And a lot of Astro Twitter were saying like a similar thing.
Yeah.
And it was going to happen, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. We have known that there was water before, but it's been limited to like very deep craters and stuff in these like dark areas.
Yeah.
So what you said about like the lunar base is the interesting thing for this is that it's in quite easily accessible areas, so we don't have to worry about trying to traverse craters and build in permanent darkness or anything like that. We can, quite easily access this water ice. So, it's really promising, I think. And yeah, just for like a bit of background, the sort of article that I found on New Scientist, they discuss it a bit. This was discovered using Sophia, which is a telescope actually built into the side of a plane that they fly, a 747.
Isn't it an infrared one?
Yeah, so it's using infrared telescope, and they managed to sort of find these the presence of water molecules in these areas that they didn't previously think there would be. So yeah, it's all good, I think.
That's awesome, isn't it?
Yeah, really is.
It'll be good for when we start like doing all of the Artemis stuff. It's interesting, really. I wonder if they knew that there was water in these areas before they chalked up the moon in the Artemis Accords, or if it's new knowledge and they're annoyed now that they've given some segment to a country that they shouldn't have or something. But no, it's class. It's class. I'm liking this new style of announcement, like how they held the press conference for Venus, now the press conference for the moon. It's more fun. We should.
Oh yeah, definitely the press conference is good. Did you watch this one? Or
I didn't, if I'm honest with you. I've been really busy with work, but
I caught a bit of it, and yeah, like the Venus one, it was all like hype. It was all all good.
Yeah. I saw a lot of people on Astro Twitter just being like, it's not going to be life. Like, this was like the day before that it was coming out, because everyone was like, oh, first Venus, now the moon. Everyone was like, nope, calm down.
Yeah. Although that would have been amazing, wouldn't it? If in space of a month we found evidence for life on Venus and the moon. But yeah, we can't hope for everything, can we?
Yeah, so we're not that lucky just yet. It is still 2020. Remember, everyone.
Yeah. Actually, did you have anything else to say on that?
Not really. That's pretty much it for these on my end. Why, have you got something else you want to?
So yeah, I just thought about it. I mentioned it before we started, didn't I? About, just to gloat briefly, a few weeks ago when we were doing the automation episode, we talked about sort of driverless trucks, and I said about where I thought they would be sort of used and stuff. Well, an article in The Verge today, so on October 27th, talks about this partnership between Waymo and Mercedes-Benz,
Yeah,
where they're trying to implement Waymo's autonomous driving technology into semi-trucks in America. So, as I understand it, they've sort of got a prototype working, and they're now starting to demo it and sort of looking to roll it out in sort of trials and stuff on the actual road. But yeah, the main reason why I wanted to talk about this was just to make myself look good. Because, as I said a few weeks ago, with this sort of driverless stuff, how I thought it would be implemented. This is a quote taken from this article from one of the sort of developers on this. So, quoting them, designed for an on-highway hub-to-hub applications, especially for long-distance monotonous transport between distribution centres. I think I hit just about every word in that when I was talking about
it was pretty much word for word.
This idea of like semi-trucks in the near future being used between distribution centres across the Americas or across the United States on the edges of cities, sticking to highways. Like, that's exactly what I said.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I just sort of wanted to bring that up, and sort of as a development of what we were talking about a few weeks ago. I thought it was quite interesting.
No, I saw that when you put it on Twitter, and I thought it was funny.
Yeah.
Class.
But yeah, I think that's sort of everything from me on that.
Yeah, I think that pretty much ties up this week's episode on sustainable energy and renewable energy. So if you enjoyed the episode, guys, be sure to give us a good review on Apple Podcasts. Make sure you're following us or you're subscribed to us on the YouTube channel. If you're watching us on YouTube, make sure you give us a thumbs up in the video, as it always helps with that YouTube algorithm. And if you want to let us know about an episode that you listen to, or if you have a future topic you want to suggest, you can hit us up on social media at The Infinite Void Pod. And if you want to drop us an email, it's theinfinitevoidpodcast@gmail.com. You can hit me up on socials at the Jacob E. Carson, and Matty is the Matty JMP. And that's pretty much it, guys. Thank you for listening to this episode, and we will see you in the Infinite Void next week.